Well, welcome to this new video, which is a question and answer session off the back of the last video I made over a year ago now on deep engine analysis. And that video sparked a lot of questions. People put questions below the video. They also emailed several in. And what I've done is I've gathered them all together, grouped them into clumps, and I'm going to try and quickly answer them today. So that will provide some clarity. And then hopefully next month, I'll release a second video, which will be an update to the first one, showing what software advancements have taken place in the last year, 18 months or so, because quite a lot has happened, and it'd be good to be brought up to date. So without further ado, let's begin with our first question off the back of the last video in January 2021.
Is automated analysis really better than infinite analysis? I've heard infinite analysis is best. What are the pros and cons of each one?
Yeah, I'm sorry if this created some confusion. I can see how it may have done. So let me try and put the record straight, as it were. If you've got one chess position and you have one computer and you're trying to find the best move in that position, and let's say you've got a minute or 10 minutes or even an hour free, then infinite analysis is king. There is nothing better. And I'm sorry if the video implied that maybe automated analysis is superior. I don't think it is. Infinite analysis, just letting the engine run on one single PV, so don't make the mistake of putting PV set to 12 or something silly where it's got 12 lines of analysis being displayed at once. Just put PV to 1, that will give you maximum search depth, and you leave it for as much time as you've got, running on as many cores as you can spare, and that will give you the best quality analysis in that time period. However, I would argue that that is not really the challenge today. Because engines have become so strong, you can get excellent analysis on a single position very quickly. The challenge really is analysing systems of positions which are interconnected, and you see that in particular in the opening. So let's say, for example, you wanted to analyse the King's Indian defence. How are you actually going to do that with infinite analysis? You would need incredible patience, where you'd have to go through it almost move by move by move, and that is not practical. And I would argue in that scenario, we're trying to get an overview of the whole opening to work out whether or not it's playable, and what white's best lines are and what black's best defences are. I would argue that in that scenario, automated analysis is far superior to infinite analysis. And part of the reason is that even if you stick to your infinite analysis model, somehow you've got to tabulate the results at the end. You've got to go through the lines, you've got to write them down somehow. Ultimately, you've got to get it into here to work out whether or not black is lost or white has just got a small edge or whatever it is. And the great advantage of Aquarium's idea, amongst others, is that it will do all that work for you. It will tabulate everything and back solve it, so that you've got that nicely presented at the end of your long analysis session. And clearly, a project like that, you're not working in a time frame of a few minutes or even an hour. You've really got to be prepared to invest several months. But nevertheless, you're going to get an excellent result at the end of it. And the other advantage, of course, is that unlike infinite analysis, you can recruit multiple computers. There's no reason why you should have to just put up with your laptop or whatever it is you're running. You can have lots and lots and lots of PCs all working on this project at once, and you can be doing infinite analysis in the background. So that's the pros and cons of infinite analysis versus automated analysis. Aquarium's idea, effectively, is lots and lots of instances of infinite analysis, all stitched together and then back solved and then tabulated and presented for you, so you can look at the results in a nice table at the end of it. And I think that's a brilliant way of analysing the opening.
Why should I upgrade from Fritz 5 when it beats me every time? I don't need anything stronger.
Well, this is a good example of why using an older engine isn't a very good idea. This is a famous game between Garry Kasparov playing white against Fritz playing black. The year is 2003, so I would guess that's Fritz. 9, somewhere around Fritz 9, maybe Fritz 8, or some version in between, but it's not quite Fritz 10, I don't think. And Kasparov has built up an impressive advantage. We've got a locked up center, considerable space advantage on the queen side. This pawn here on a5 is going to drop, and if black is going to stay in this game, he needs to find counterplay fast. What I'd like you to do is maybe pause the video for 30 seconds, try and assess this position and come up with a plan for black. See how you go. Well, as indicated, black faces some challenges here and he needs to come up with something quickly. Why don't we have a look to see how the game went, and then maybe you'll appreciate the problems that black is in a bit better. Kasparov came up with a plan of sticking his king on the queen side and then advancing on the queen side, escaping all kingside counterplay. This is what happened. So some shuffling, but the a-pawn dropped. White needs to overprotect f2, and then the king moves over, the a-pawn will start to advance. Here it comes. And we'll stop there. Black is completely lost here, as you can verify by putting on a modern engine. Now, if you go back to the critical position, which is this one, what would you play as black? Fritz came up with the move bishop d6, which is a typical smarty pants move of Fritz's style of play at the time. The point is that the bishop can't be taken because the white queen would be trapped from knight b6. But the thing is, from a strategic point of view, it doesn't do a thing. Bishop d6 looks flashy, but it doesn't actually achieve anything. And Junior's idea of playing rook e8, probably with the idea of dropping the knight into f8, I imagine, something like that, also is not really on point. The grandmasters commenting on this position came up with a better idea, and what they were saying was black should play knight e8 and then f5 with the idea of playing f4. Now, if you put this into Stockfish, I think Stockfish comes up with an even better idea, which is it's the same plan of f5, f4, but preceding it with h5, h4 in order to prevent white's defense on g3, because if white can get in g3, then it makes the f5, f4 break a bit harder. So you proceed it with h5, h4. I think that's the idea. But really, it's the same plan. We need to get that f-pawn rolling. Therefore, the rook belongs on f8, not e8, as Junior is getting it wrong, and Fritz also got it completely wrong. So this is a great example why using a modern engine is best. The old engines is not simply about whether they can beat you, it's about whether they can give you accurate analysis and explain to you the correct evaluation of a position that you might find yourself in. And this is quite a good example with a locked up center of how the old engines really get things wrong. So this is a good example of why a modern engine, especially with the new neural net technology, is far superior.
Which engine has the most human style of play, and should I care?
Don't know, don't care is the short answer to the question. I'm probably not the best qualified person to answer this, but I don't really get the question anymore. I used to be obsessed with this question, which engine is the most human and so on, but now I see it more as a marketing ploy by some engine developers, because I don't really see what advantage that brings or even what the question means. There was a comment a few years ago which kind of set me free in my thinking, and it was by Magnus Carlsen. And he was making the point that if you've got a style, you've really got a bias, because you're trying to impose your will upon the position. I am an attacking player, or I am a positional player, whereas in reality you want to play the position, not impose your will upon the position. And when I saw that, I thought, that's interesting, because he was kind of making the point that to have a style is to have a weakness. And then I started looking into it a bit more, and take that position I've just shown you and stick an old engine on it, one of the engines with the so-called human styles of play, like Junior, and all you see really is meaningless shuffling. It's not particularly human at all. I don't think a human would just shuffle around in that kind of position. They would try to do something. And the thing about style of play is it's really there if you want to see it. That's the thing. I mean, we've had several engines in the past that have made a huge deal. You know, this engine Vitruvius or whatever it was called, I can't remember its name, but you know, a few years ago there was an engine that really specialised on this subject. And someone made the point, you know, it's a brilliant marketing ploy because it's there if you want to see it. If you don't see it, you don't see it. You know, very clever. A couple of people have asked some supplemental questions. Surely, someone writes here, surely if you use an additional engine, you get more variety in analysis. Yeah, you do, but why can't you just put Stockfish in multi-PV mode? What's the difference? Multi-PV mode slows down analysis. Well, yeah, it does a bit, but so would running a second engine on your PC. I can't really see where this is going unless you've got lots of computers where you can have lots of engines running in the background. That might be an exception, but I just don't get this. Someone writes, Jack writes, I want to play an 1800 ELO engine with a human style of play. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't help. I mean, if you want to play an 1800 ELO opponent with a human style of play, why don't you just go online and play a human with, you know, an 1800 ELO rating? I don't get this question, I'm afraid. Sorry.
How many engines should I own?
How many engines should you own? As many as you want. I know plenty of pros who get by on Stockfish and LC0, Leela, and that's all they use. Actually, I was on a course that Chess Space India ran about a year ago, and there were several really strong players, over 2,700 on that course, and they were just using Stockfish and LC0. That's all they had. It does depend upon how many computers you've got, but I think the law of diminishing returns kicks in very fast with each extra engine you add. And Stockfish is free, LC0 is free. I don't think you need to have more than that, but it's entirely up to you.
Is it better to use one engine on all your cores, or a different engine on each of your cores to get more variety?
I'd say in the vast majority of cases, having one engine running on all your cores will be far superior to having 4 or 8 different engines running on one core each, because you'll just get a much more accurate result. What you want is your strongest engine, Stockfish, running on all your cores, and that will give you the best quality analysis. I know people sometimes make a big deal about variety, and you know, it's not a completely stupid question, to be fair. It's not completely stupid, but you can get a similar result just by putting PV mode onto 2 or 3 and giving it more time to analyze. And you'll get a huge speed up going from, say, 1 core to 8 cores. Whereas if you've got 8 engines all on 1 core each, you're making it pretty hard work for your PC. So I would use 1 engine, all the cores.
Is Aquarium still supported, and do you still use it?
Is Aquarium still supported, and do you still use it? Yes, I definitely still use it. In fact, you can't see, but off camera there's a room in there with about a dozen PCs all networked together, and they're all running Aquarium, so I definitely still use it. However, there's good news, bad news with Aquarium. I mean, technically the product is still going because there is an Aquarium 2022, and I'm just glancing down all the comments from the last video. There are loads on Aquarium. Is it dead? Is it still being developed? Is it worth upgrading? Lots of comments like this. I've got Aquarium 2020. Should I upgrade to 2022? And so on and so on and so on. All these kind of comments. Here's the thing. Aquarium 2022 is available to buy on the Chess OK website. And if you haven't got it, I would say, and you're interested in doing deep position analysis on, you know, especially on the openings, I would definitely recommend it. No doubt about that whatsoever. If you've got a fairly recent version, I wouldn't bother upgrading. And the reason for that is that 2022 has got a new splash screen which says 2022 on it, but in every other regard I cannot tell the difference between that and 2021, and I cannot tell the difference between that and 2020 and 2019 and 2018 and so on. In fact, the last version I'm aware of that had an update was 2016. I just can't tell the difference between them. And therefore, if you've got a fairly recent version, I wouldn't bother upgrading. I always did, but the reason for that was I wanted access to the 7-man table bases. And I've recently heard that people are struggling to get connected with the Lomonosov table bases. And I've tried it yesterday and I couldn't connect either. So I don't know what that means for Aquarium. It might just be that server is down, the table-based server is down, or it could be that there's a connection issue between the two, who knows. But if you're hoping to do endgame analysis, you might have a problem there. So that's my advice. If you haven't got it, why not get it while it's still available? If you've got it already and it's within the last 5 years, probably stick with what you've got. My great fear with Aquarium is that one day Microsoft will release an update for Windows. We'll all be forced to download the update, and then that piece of software which is no longer being developed will no longer run. That is my great fear, but if they don't develop it, what can we do? C'est la vie, as they say.
Does Aquarium have a limit to the number of engine instances it can run in IDEA, or the number of computers that can be networked?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think there is a theoretical limit. I've personally had well over 100 instances of an engine running on a LAN with one version of Aquarium hosting it all. And I'm pretty sure there are other users who've had far more than that. What you will run into is you'll run into a practical problem with how much the interface can cope with if all of the engines are dumping their analysis at the same time on the interface. So the way I get around it is I tend to have quite long analysis settings. So for example, I have, at the moment, I'm running one instance of Stockfish on each individual core. There are about 100 cores because I've just collected a ton of computers off eBay. And I will get each instance of an engine running for about 10 minutes or so. So each instance is taking quite a long time before it dumps its analysis on the interface. The other thing I do, which I find helps a lot, is I don't set all the engines off simultaneously. I set them off in batches. So the first 30 will go, and then I give it a couple of minutes, and then I set the second 30 and it can go, and then the third 30 and so on until I've reached my maximum core count. And that way I find they don't crash into each other, and it allows everything to run smoothly. Probably if you're using multiple PCs, those PCs won't be running at the same speed anyway, and you can adjust that setting in the engines option in Aquarium. And that's really helpful because it means that you kind of want everything to be out of sync, because that way the interface isn't being swamped with 100 instances of data all piled on top of it at once, because it will crash. Aquarium isn't that durable actually. But if you stagger the start and give plenty of breathing space with the timing, yeah, you should be fine. I mean, just yesterday I had about 130 instances running. It didn't seem to have a problem. So yeah, you should be fine.
Which is better for chess, AMD, Intel or Apple?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question. It seems to come up a lot on the forums. Which is better for chess, AMD, Intel or Apple? Okay, this is quite an involved question, so let me start with Apple, because I think that one's the clearest. The two things I notice about Apple are there's a huge amount of hype and there's a huge amount of hate. And the hype tends to come from the flamboyant language which goes with the product launch. It is phenomenal, incredible, etc., etc., etc. They use these words a lot, and almost without limit. And I wonder if that somehow provokes a lot of hate. On the other hand, their attention to detail and styling of the products I personally find very attractive. The video you're watching now has been edited on Final Cut Pro, so that's on a Mac. So I'm definitely not an Apple hater, far from it. I'm quite attracted to their ecosystem, Apple Watch, and so on. But I could not recommend them for chess. And there are a cluster of reasons for that. First of all, my understanding of their overall performance with the new M1 variants and the M2 chip is that the performance per watt is very good, but the overall wattage is quite low, and therefore they simply will not compete with the high-end Intels and AMD chips. So there's that. Secondly, I think although the performance per watt may be very good, the performance per pound or dollar or euro, whatever currency you're working in, is less favourable because you've got to buy an entire Mac. And therefore, just on that metric, it does make it quite hard to recommend them. But even if that wasn't the problem, there are some additional problems as well. One of the big problems you've got is that Macs run macOS, and therefore you're limited in your chess experience with whatever software you can get, and really that's not very much. Aquarium won't run, all of the chess-based family like Fritz doesn't run. You've got some which are hybrid, so Shredder will run, but my understanding is that the Mac version of the Shredder GUI is less feature complete compared with the Windows version. Hyax, I think, is the same across, so that would be an option for you. But basically, Windows is going to beat macOS hands down in the chess department. It will not be close. And therefore, you're immediately limited to whatever you can run on Mac. The other problem you've got is that if you get crafty and you think to yourself, well, that's okay, what I'll do is I'll install Parallels on macOS and then I'll run Windows through Parallels. Well, okay, that can be done, I suppose. But here's the thing. If you buy, let's say you go top of the range and you go for the new Mac Studio and you go for the M1 Ultra chip, which is currently the fastest chip that the fastest CPU that Apple make. It's considerably faster than the M2. That's a 20-core CPU. Now, if you run that on Parallels, even the Pro version of Parallels, as I understand it, at the point of making this video, it might have changed by the time you see this, but my understanding is it can only run 8 cores. That's even with the Pro version. So your Windows emulation is only running 8 of the 20 cores. The other 12 cores are sat there doing nothing. Then, what do you actually run on Windows? Well, presumably you want the strongest engine you can get, that's Stockfish. So you go to download Stockfish, but which version are you going to get? I'm not sure all of the different compiles are supported on through Parallels, like AVX2 and so on. So can you see the problems? You're basically making a mountain of pain for yourself by going down that route. Now, if you already own a Mac, let's say because you're a video editor or you're a music producer or something, and you like macOS for its, for all the applications that run, in the creative environment, then fine. All you're doing now is you're making use of something you already own. But I definitely could not recommend Apple for chess, to make a purchase for chess, if you can see the difference there. So that really leaves us with Intel and AMD, and this is an interesting discussion. If you went back a year or two, I would say AMD just wins hands down. It's not even close. Just buy AMD at whatever price point you want. Now it's slightly less clear because Intel have released Alder Lake. That's a new type of CPU which uses a big little design. And so you've got some cores which are high performance and some cores which are high efficiency. And overall, that does produce quite a fast chip in the low to medium end of the spectrum. And therefore, if you're just an infinite analysis user and you want your best bang for your buck, I would say take a look at Intel, because they are getting seriously fast now in the low to mid range. The only caveat I can think of is if you're an Aquarium user and you want multiple instances of Stockfish all running at the same speed on your PC, having the big little design is a bit of a headache, because you're going to get some cores running super fast and some cores running less fast. You may be able to solve that problem by looking into affinities, but it's a headache I wouldn't want. And although it is quite easy to manage Aquarium when you've got different PCs networked together, where you can set different PCs and tell Aquarium on the master computer to adjust the speed allowance for each PC. So your really slow PC is given 2 or 3 times as much time to analyze, and your really fast PC it runs much quicker. When you've got different speed cores all on the same PC, on your host PC, oof, that would be a headache, because you don't know which ones are running at which speed. That's the problem. So that would be my caveat on that. And then the final thing to say on the debate is if you're at the high end and money is no object, you just want the fastest thing going, then it's clearly AMD. They are the winners. There's nothing that can really stand up to Threadripper or Dual Epics. Yes, of course you'll pay for that, but Intel they haven't got enough cores on their Xeons, so AMD would win at the high end. So there's my recommendation. It's only my opinion. If you want to go ahead, go ahead. But I would say, personally, certainly for my use, the order would be AMD, Intel, Apple, in that order. Hope that helps.
How do you learn more about computer chess? Are you an expert, and how do you find them?
No, I'm not an expert. I'm afraid. The experts, in my opinion, are the people who've actually written their own chess program and they've got it working. I think they deserve to be called the experts. Below that, one notch below, you've got a ton of people who know really huge amounts about chess engines, and they've got a vast amount of knowledge. Maybe because they work in the industry or they're really involved in IT, they're au fait with networking, that kind of thing, and they understand. They maybe haven't written their own chess engine, but they've got high levels of knowledge, and you can meet those kind of people on chess forums. And then a notch below that, you've got people like me who are sort of interested amateurs, and I'm trying to update my knowledge and keep it current and correct errors when I find it, but that's the category I put myself in. I have done some programming in Fortran, but nothing to do with chess, and I'm definitely not a chess expert. If you want to grow in knowledge, this is how I would do it. I would start off by watching a few YouTube videos or reading a few articles on how a chess engine works. So, for example, just understand that there's 2 main parts to a chess engine. There's the search part that looks ahead, and there's the evaluation function which assesses each individual position. So just get a basic understanding of what's involved with those 2. And then after that, I would join a forum. So Talk Chess would be a very good one. That's the one I frequent, and I would heartily recommend that. There are a lot of people on there that know a huge amount about computer chess. And then you can ask your questions, and slowly you grow in knowledge. Somebody says, do you think chess forums could be policed differently? Yeah, yes, I do. So unfortunately what happens is the people who know the most on chess forums post the least, and the people who know the least post the most. And there are some people who are just prolific, and I cannot understand why they're just not banned, because they spout absolute nonsense. They're not interested in learning. Almost every post they make has got an error in it, or it's nonsensical, or it's just silly, and I would clamp down on that. That's how I would do it. To be honest, if I was in charge of the world, the way I'd do it is I'd say all of the chess programmers deserve a gold star next to their name. They've earned that. No matter how strong their chess engine is, they deserve that. They've wrestled with the process, and they deserve that recognition, so that we know that, because we know whatever they say is likely to be of a very high quality. And then there's a ton of people who are one notch down, that maybe they could get a silver star or something, because what they say is highly likely to be accurate. And then maybe right at the bottom of the heap, you could have a skull and crossbones warning for some people who are just routinely unhelpful. It is annoying when people just post error for almost the sake of it. The programmers will typically give you a much sharper, more concise definition of things. So, for example, if you meet face to face with somebody who is claiming to be some kind of chess engine expert, I would say, what would be a question I would ask? I would ask something like this. I would say, can you explain alpha beta pruning? How does minimax work? What's null move pruning? Those kind of questions. And if you get a blank look, you know that the person's faking it, because people make all kinds of claims about how a chess engine works, and nearly always they don't know what they're talking about actually. But those are the kind of questions I would ask. Now, if you ask me what is null move pruning, I could answer that, but I would give you a round the houses, non-technical answer. If you asked a programmer that, you would get 2 sentences or 3 sentences of very sharp, crisp, precise definition, and that is just much better. So that's what I'm talking about the different levels of knowledge and how helpful each one is. We used to have this culture where programmers would probably say a bit more than they used to, than they do rather. So I know there's some issues around engine origins, but Vaz, author of Ribka, he was excellent at answering questions on his forum, on the Ribka forum. Robert Houdart from Houdini, also excellent at if you emailed him, you would get a very sharp answer back that was very useful. Bob Hyatt, on the Talk Chess forum, I really miss Bob, because he would take the time to answer questions from a beginner, but he would also call out nonsense when he saw it. And it's good for a forum to have a few people there who just cannot tolerate nonsense and call it out. And Bob was great at that. He just couldn't help himself. And you need someone like that so that the forum just doesn't contain error. Because if you're new to a forum and you get one answer from one person and another answer from another person, you don't always know who the experts are, as it were. Funny story, perhaps, that there was a situation, this is going back about 10 years, but there was a situation on the Ribka forum around about 2010, where some guy had bought himself a top-end dual Xeon system. It was, if I remember rightly, it was a dual 6-core Xeon system, which was water-cooled, very expensive, and overclocked as well. For some reason, the Xeons were overclockable back then. And he installed a power supply into his workstation, which was excessively powerful. I think the system drew about 800 or 900 watts. It was, fairly thirsty. But nevertheless, he installed a whopping 2,000 watt power supply. And then he argued that because his power supply was, I think it was gold rated or something, it was producing far more electricity than everyone else's power supply, and cleaner electricity as well, and therefore his computer was much faster than anyone else's, even if they had the same processor running at the same clock speed. Now, at the time, because I knew relatively little back then, I didn't know what to make of that. And I thought, wow, maybe this is true. Maybe there's a special clean electricity that can go into some computers and it makes them run really fast, whereas the rest of us have to put up with dirty electricity, and it stifles your computer from running properly. And then finally, somebody called him out and they said, if your processor is the same as everybody else's processor, and if it's running at the same clock speed as everybody else's processor, and there's no thermal throttling going on, it will run at the same speed. It doesn't matter if you put a 6,000 watt power supply in, it's not going to go any faster. And when this person said that, I thought to myself, that is so obvious. This guy was just talking nonsense. But it took an expert to call it out for it to become obvious to everybody else. And that is why I wish the forums were a bit better policed. I think maybe the moderators could do a little bit more. I know it's difficult being a moderator because you're trying to provide maximum freedom for the maximum number of people, but I think where one or two individuals are being consistently unhelpful and almost deliberately unhelpful, then it would be good. But that's how I would start. If you're trying to grow in knowledge, and the other thing is just be really, really humble. Be prepared to be wrong and be prepared to be corrected on a regular basis. I'm constantly dumping inaccurate thinking in my own head so that I keep up to date with stuff. So I thought I understood a concept, then somebody explains it to me, I realised I hadn't quite understood it, so you dump your old knowledge and replace it with the better knowledge. And just keep doing that and you'll quickly get a good understanding of things. And it can be about how a chess engine works or how the GUI works or whatever. But that's where I would start.